Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction. And I'm muted. Okay. Checking the stream. Anyway, we're live and hopefully Emil has rejoined us.
I am here. Hi, Randy.
Okay, great. Emil, I was just checking, and the big Jitsi party that we had was 6 years ago, because there's a YouTube still up on that. And there's quite a different look. And here's what I'm going to, I don't know. Do you have video, Emil, or are you strictly audio?
I can turn it on. I can turn it on.
No, but I mean,
bring it on.
Well, can you see is the question. Because here's the slide.
I can. Yes.
So that was the slide from our Jitsi party 6 years ago.
Well, yes. There's been change, and I have another date for you. Do you hear me, by the way?
Yep, we hear you.
So, I believe the first time ever we were on VUC, we weren't even called Jitsi back then. It was still SIP Communicator. The same team, same source code. And I believe that was 2009, or yes, 2008 or 2009. So it's around 10 years ago that we were first here. And
I was just going to say that was when we first. No, I was just going to say that was when we first met you, and you were in Strasbourg, and we tried. My wife and I tried to come to Strasbourg, and it was extremely complicated because we had just moved here, and there was no easy way, and so we never did make it. But
yeah, that was
I recall
so long ago. I do too. I remember that too. And I really am struggling to find the words to say it in a way that it doesn't sound like just blunt politeness, but it feels so good to be here, just sharing the pleasure of being with people who see the world the same way as you. And it's so amazing. Thank you very much for having me. And thanks for still doing this.
We love it. And I would like to find out if Corrado, who's also with us, because I don't think you guys have ever met. Corrado, you are the newest person around, and you may have been around for the last hangout or whatever. But the point is, you don't know about the beginnings of SIP Communicator. So if you have any questions, you'd be the one, maybe.
Possibly. The main question is what brought you to get your heads together and create something that like SIP Communicator and Jitsi. How did before SIP Communicator even started? What was your idea, and where is it now?
All the wrong reasons. It's people say that, and it's true, that before you go and start something new, you should go out and check what exists. And people say that many projects are born because someone tried to scratch an itch. Companies are born because you try to solve a problem for someone, to propose value. And looking back, we did so many things the wrong way, and it still turned out all right. So it makes you wonder. So I'm going to tell you, I started SIP Communicator because I wanted to. There was no other reason. It was just a point of passion for me. I just wanted to do phones. So there was this professor at the University of Strasbourg who wanted to do IPv6 with different things. I wanted to do phones. He said, let's do phones with IPv6. And I went and I coded for 2 weeks, and I came back and I was able to make a call with SIP Communicator to Microsoft Messenger. I said it was audio video, and I said it's 90% ready. And we've been working on it for 20 years now, but 16. I guess 10% takes a lot of time. There's some time warping here, but the important point is that that was just the thing sitting there. It became an open source project. Some people were interested. They looked into it. It was never meant, hey, this is the solution to this problem that the other things are not solving. But it somehow landed at a place where it was that. It was an IPv6 validation tool at first. Then it became this combination of chat and telephony on different protocols. Then it became a very powerful client. Then parts of this client morphed into a server-side video router. This was around the time when WebRTC was born. And this is when it exploded. Up until then, and I'm probably going to talk a little bit about that as well. Like we at first it was just a student project, as I just explained, and then we just liked working on it. Again, no grand plan, no grand scheme. We just liked working on it, and we thought, let's try and make some money. How would we make money out of it, just so that we can have a living? Well, people want to do stuff with it, and maybe some of them would want to pay for that stuff, and they did. So we were a services company for a long time. We were just making the software the way we wanted it to be, and some people were, interested in that path enough that they would pay us for development work on it. Again, no business plan, no value prop, just headed in some direction. And then WebRTC came along. At that point, we had extracted part of the client into what became Jitsi Video Bridge. And this was the big bang. It was, oh my God, these things are made for each other. It was one of the first video routers for WebRTC. It is at this point probably the most evolved one, because after bumping so many different problems into so many different particles, we finally found our path of a very specific problem that we're solving, and we do it well. Adrian Georgescu, who is a regular of this show, at one point said something that stuck with me for life. And he was saying, in this life, everything is Brownian motion. You bump into someone who bumps into someone that comes back and bumps into you, and it just makes your life better. And I completely subscribe to that. It's just, we just bumped into plenty of things, and it ended up turning out all right for us with no grand plan from the start. So I wouldn't recommend the same path to other people. Doesn't necessarily work out, I guess, although I believe probably would if you keep bumping into things for long enough. And it might have been just luck, but it did work out.
Well, in fact, it's what I think about humanity in general. You want to go from A to B, and you go in a trajectory, but there's someone else in a trajectory going from A to B, and you're going to bump into someone else or intersect, and that influences your direction. It changes it. And we are all in a big pinball machine where we all bounce against each other. But that's how life opportunities come across. And I guess with this project, you experienced the classic 90-10, 10-90 problem. So 90% of the work is done in 10% of the time. The rest of 10% of the project takes 90% of the time. So
pretty much.
It's an evolution, is in constant evolution. But at the beginning, you practically started as a personal project, a pet project of yours, because you like to do that, and then you bumped into something and you changed direction. So again, I think it's a metaphor for practically every project we witness.
Yeah, I think so.
James has raised his hand 4 times.
Yep.
So go ahead, James.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. That's a really good intro there. Last time we had you on, Emil, you were still in Texas and still working hard there. Since then, you've moved back to London. Can you fill us in on how that happened, and as much as you can tell us, and what are you up to now?
I can tell you anything as long as someone's willing to listen. In 2014, we got approached by Atlassian, who were interested in our state at that point, in our WebRTC solution. So we became the video engine for Atlassian. We continued. That's when we moved to Texas, which is where we've joined the VUC for a few times. We continued developing the open source, the Jitsi project as an open source project. Atlassian was willing to let us do that, so it worked out well. And then 3 years later, there's this thing. It's one of the values in Silicon Valley culture: focus. Companies, a lot of the successful companies are successful because they focus on the thing that they do and they try to do it really, really well. And at that point, basically Atlassian decided, hey, this entire thing that we're doing here with the messaging clients, with Stride and HipChat, it kind of feels like it's taken us off focus. Let's just continue doing what we're doing best with Jira and Confluence. Let's partner with the people who are doing messaging best. And it discontinued work on Stride and HipChat. It sold them to Slack, and it created a partnership with Slack, which has been working out very, very well for both companies. In the aftermath of that event, so that was actually 3.5 years after almost 4 actually, after we arrived in Texas. Jitsi had evolved within Atlassian in a very sane way. From an engineering and from a business unit perspective, we were always very independent, very pluggable. We had always designed everything so that it would be usable by any other team, not for a specific purpose. So it made us a great microservice, video conferencing as a service mini company that was actually very appealing for a divestiture. And we started looking for a new partner in crime, and we talked to many companies. There were many, many interesting possibilities, and we decided to choose 8x8. And 8x8 decided to choose us as well. We really liked where the company was headed. One thing that we actually liked about 8x8 was this willingness to not, in certain areas, to not worry about focus that much. So 8x8 is a company that started with telephony, with cloud telephony. It's doing extremely well there. It has a world-class service, many, many enterprise customers, many, many huge customers. And yet it thought, this is not good enough. We want to be more than that. And they decided to risk and say, let's just go in and do other things as well. They decided to do messaging, they decided to do contact center, and they decided to do meetings. And this is where we come in. We like this desire to risk and to the desire to go in standalone meeting solution. We thought, this is great. This is what we wanted to do. So we joined forces with 8x8, but for very pragmatic reasons, immigration reasons, basically. Many of the people who were in the US had to leave the country for at least a little bit of time. 8x8 had offices in London, so we continued working from this very beautiful city now. So I am coming to you live from the streets of London, and I really like the place.
That's great to have you in UK. It's amazing we haven't seen more of you, bearing in mind that you are now in UK. They must be working you extremely hard.
It's pub season, so we should do that at some point, James. Yes, we are working extremely hard. We really want to make this thing work, and it's super exciting because, gosh, I don't want to bore everyone with these super enthusiastic statements, but it really is super exciting. We think we are very close to releasing something very huge in the meetings market. So, and we'll have plenty of other opportunities to talk about these things. But in the meantime, one of the very cool things that we experienced here. So we've been doing open source for a very long time. It's in our DNA. And interestingly enough, I find us significantly less religious about it than many other companies. We're very pragmatic about open source, even though it's extremely important to us. Now, it really saved our asses multiple times here. So we went through. So we started this in 2003. That was 16 years ago. We went through multiple changes in direction. We kept working on the same projects. In 2016, we went with our code to a new company, kept working on the same project. The company decided to not work in that direction anymore. We changed places. We keep working on the same project. If there have been people who have been working with us at times, then decided to choose different paths, they leave with their work. Their work follows them because of the open source nature of the project. And there are others right now who have been in pretty much exactly the same situation as us, who are not that fortunate, who are going through acquisitions, who have to consider leaving behind years, more than a decade of work and so this is one thing that worked out really well for us. But yeah.
Jay's got his hand up, but I'll just conclude. I think you've done extremely well keeping your project going and keeping your core team all as one team, even moving intercontinentally. And so you need to receive a gold star for that, Emil. The way that you've kept it all together is wonderful. Jay, have a go.
Thank you, James. Emil, you're bringing up some points that are, I think, core to where we're at in the entire ecosystem regarding this tug of war between open source and proprietary. And it's really heartening to me to hear you talk about how your development team and your efforts have a long-term nature to them that's kind of unique to open source. And I think that's a really, really critical point in today's environment, because my sense is that if, developers are probably really reluctant now to spend X amount of time on some sort of proprietary system where they might have to leave it all behind. And I think this is not only a real key benefit of open source, but it also brings up some fundamental questions about monetization and how do you create this open source ecosystem that has a lasting life, and yet how do you monetize that? So that's my question.
Yeah.
Any comments about that?
Right. And do you still hear me, by the way? My headset disconnects every now and then. So if you stop hearing me, let me know. So this is the question, and it's so important because so many people. I'm sorry if it's noisy. It's going to get better in a minute. So many people focus on it way too much, and so many people decide not to do open source because they focus on it so much. But before I answer, I want to address something else first. The question is often, this thing often comes up, and yeah, you have to do open source. It's good to do open source. Yeah, do open source. Do open source. I don't think that's a sane approach. I don't think that level of religiousness is sane or good for anyone. People should do open source, not as I don't think it's a live goal. You should be very clear. Okay, why am I doing certain piece open source? Why do I want this? In and of itself, it's not an inherent good. There's a ton of stuff in every company that, if you're going to do a library for accessing your private directory or your private company core thing, you're going to make that open source. I could care less. Anyone could care less. Who cares? It's a thing that solves your problem, no one else's problem. Do whatever you want with it. Don't go and be religious about, everything has to be open source. Now, there was a key point there. Yeah, I want the bulk of my work to follow me. I want the bulk of my work to the investment of my life. I want to know that this is somehow protected and will be available to me even if we split paths. That is a good decision, and that could be. There are many ways you could achieve that. At Atlassian, for example, there were a bunch of developers that got hired because of their contributor status in Electron. So these people didn't found the project. They just became specialists in it, and they got hired because of their skill. And there's plenty of use of Electron now that they could move around companies and work on that investment and continue growing it for a very long time. And the monetization question is so so interesting. There's no single answer to it. In fact, sometimes there is no answer to it. Very often, I have found that the least strenuous relationships between open source projects and companies is when the monetization question of the core is not directly related to the company business. So this was a case for Atlassian, and it is a case for open source. The value, sorry, for 8x8, the value of an 8x8 offering or of an Atlassian system. It's about all the pieces knowing to solve fulfillment problems.
And we're losing.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, Emily. I mean, Emil, I will lose you a bit. You're probably not in a good coverage area.
No, in fact, I do have one bar now. I would defer to Mr. Sadiq Khan and his network coverage. Is it better now?
Yeah, much better
Good.
now.
Okay.
You're good.
So, where was I going with all this? Yes, I would say the monetization today, it's like, think of it as artificial intelligence. We're all going to be able to do things today with technology, with artificial intelligence. We're able to do things today that we weren't many years ago. The value that we're providing, however, is in the way we combine these pieces and build different things out of them. And you know, if you think of it this way, the value that every company, each and every one of us, the value that we provide as human beings to other human beings is so thin compared to all the value that we're building upon that has come through our lives from open source libraries, from technologies, from inventions. And even if you go back through the ages, discoveries, centuries of science are built into every single thing that we sell today. And our merit, our credit in this is probably 1% of 1%. And it's kind of the same with open source. Yes, you're going to be building this piece because you need to move in a certain direction. But the monetization is going to be on the very tiny percentage that you're adding on top of it. And yet it's still valuable. And it shouldn't shock you that it's so little, because that's the nature of what we all do. It's just a little contribution to centuries of contributions. So, did that become too philosophical? I don't know. But I hope I'm making sense.
No, the fact is that you just take something like Unix, Dennis Ritchie, and whatever the other guy's name.
Right, exactly.
Or better yet, you know, all the languages, I don't know how many languages are used, programming languages are used, tons, right? But for example, the C language from those guys, you know, how much was built on that? Infinite number of things were built on it. Things are still built on it, right? Compilers, the whole notion of compiling, I mean, goes back to the invention of computing, the discovery of electricity, atomics. I mean, you're right. Once we think about it, we zoom back, and we're really nothing. We're basically nothing. We add a tiny, I can't think of the word now, a little veneer of discovery to all that has come before. Very good point.
You know, I was looking for exactly. It kept coming to me as vernis, and yes, a little veneer. It's exactly that. We get paid for the veneer, but sometimes, you know, even if you are doing that, maybe you're going to have to put together a leg under the table or something like that. It's going to be more work. You're still going to get paid for only the veneer, and this is the role of open source, is what we do today. It's kind of a lot of basic work that has to be done. But the customers that are paying you they don't care about these details. They're interested in the very final offering that you're delivering to them. and you can have two companies building upon the same open source code. And we've seen that a lot with Asterisk as well, with Camelio. Take Camelio. Camelio is a wonderful example. It's such a powerful technology, but yet you have two companies on top of it. Like if you take something like, I don't know, 1&1 or, and like there's different companies that you would, and 2600 hertz and like that use this project, and the same project, and it's probably in terms of lines of code, the bulk of their offering, and yet the customer value perceived by these two companies is just entirely different. They couldn't be farther apart. So, yeah, same point, I guess.
That, and then what you're talking about there, Emil, is presentation layer, actually, meaning marketing, meaning the interface with the customer.
Meaning veneer.
Yeah, meaning veneer. But I mean, you and I could be offering the identical service. 8x8's a huge company. They have different services, but there could be a smaller company like the one Corrado is running that offers identical services. And some people will gravitate towards his company because he has a certain presentation layer, which is basically him, his personality, and so on. And
but that's the service.
Right.
That's the service that he provides. And that's that contact, that human interaction. That's what he's getting paid for, not for the open source code that chips in his solution.
Well, it's not just the level of service, but also the quality of the service. It's just, beside the personal touch, is also the ability to choose the right tools. And again, you choose open source or closed source, depending on the environment, the client, the customer level of knowledge and acceptance of your suggestions, or you're driven by the client that demands some sort of environment. So again, flexibility is what small businesses do, is what I do. I'm trying to be flexible, but rest assured, as soon and as much as I can introduce some open source in the solution, I will do, like network attached storage server, like anything that could be back office or in the background that is not visible to the end user. I always go for open source or for community driven. For example, I am a big fan of pfSense, that although now is a commercial project underneath Netgate, there's always an community-driven open source code at the back, and it's open. You can create plugins and so on. So openness is beyond control of the source and accountability of the source code, but also open to the community, open to the suggestions, open. That's it.
I guess absolutely, Corrado. And I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that open source in this case is not solving a problem for your customers. It's solving a problem for you. That your customers come to you because they have very specific problems that are hard problems, and you help solve them. The solutions that you bring into that, you choose them to be open source because that provides value to you. You know that there's going to be less vendor lock anymore, but those are and you won't have to reinvest all of your time becoming expert in entirely different projects. So but your customers, at the end of the day, the thing that they care about is just their problem being solved in their specific circumstances, which is what you're doing for them.
Question though, Emil, do you think there's a growing concern in the overall information technology ecosystem about being burned by proprietary constructs that we're all building part of our businesses upon?
I don't.
So in other words,
I would say it's not the same. It's not. I wouldn't think it's different. No, it's probably more noticeable today because we're so used to so much of what we do being reusable, and now all of a sudden we notice it so much when something isn't, and someone can pull the plug on it. Maybe the concern is growing. I don't think that the problem is growing. I think the problem is actually lessening.
What will you elaborate on that? What do you mean the problem is lessening?
So there is, if you look at, take Electron for example, all right? So or take Internet Explorer. For a long time, someone would go and invest into some heavy system that's based on Internet Explorer. That project might even be open source, but it runs best on Internet Explorer. Then all of a sudden, Microsoft go and they change some main layer of their Internet Explorer functionality, and you're, pardon my French, screwed. Today, I think people have become way more sensitive to that problem. They notice it a lot more, but the presence of reusable technology in our life is just beyond anything that has existed before. With, well, Internet Explorer is essentially Chrome at the end of the year, if you look at it that way. And Electron, if you want to go and build a client today, a few years ago, you had to go and build everything by yourself. You had to lose libraries like OpenGL or low-level stuff that that implied a lot of work for you, and many of it could have just been was proprietary and could have just disappeared. Today, you have all of this stuff, all of this foundation that you're building on, like Electron, for example, that is just there. So what I'm saying is you are much less dependent on proprietary technology today, as in many areas of the IT industry, than you were 20 years ago. But the sensitivity to that problem has indeed grown. So maybe it is more of a perceived problem that we are dependent on others, but in fact, we're much less so than we were 20 years ago.
Okay, I get your points, and I think that's all of that is a very valid observation. Thank you.
That's probably a level of perception. It's the perception we have as people in the field, in the technology, with the technology, and we know many things that are behind the curtains, whereas our clients and the general people just see a ball, a surface of a ball, and not what's inside the core. They don't care what's inside the bowling ball. They need a bowling ball with 3 holes with the fingers, for the fingers to strike. That's all they need. They don't need to know how it's balanced inside. That's an analogy, but we are crafting the bowling ball, but the clients don't need to know.
Well, that's true. They don't need to know until they get burned, until they put a bunch of time and effort to Google Plus, and then all of a sudden, Google Plus is no more.
I went with a very simple tool to explain that. Yeah, if you lay your eggs in a basket, and that basket is a commercial enterprise with specific targets, and is using, although an open, a proprietary technology, you are building a bridge, and you're going on the other side of the river, and you choose to go through that bridge. If the bridge is broken, you're left stranded on the other side. Your choices must be open and continually open. As an end client, is my duty to give all my clients an open option to switch from a system to another. I will never try to lock in my clients into something that is not immediately, or with a bit of planning, reversible in something that is an alternative.
And I would say that people are actually a lot more sensitive about this, and they do pay attention to it a lot more than they used to. There's this entire thing. So I guess I'm less. I'm very exposed to internal big enterprise, big development shop concerns like Atlassian or 8x8. And in many enterprise companies today, there is this concern, there is this dilemma internally between build or rent. And there was a lot of that concern around, yeah, we got to build this, because what if we buy it from some company that just goes belly up the next day, and we're kind of, we're in trouble. And in many cases, the knee-jerk reaction was, well, we're not going to buy from some small, known to no one companies, because we want to protect ourselves from that risk. However, what does that mean? Well, you end up polluting the ocean. You end up with an abysmal velocity, and you end up being able to provide less value to your competitors than, not to your customers than your competitors. So that's not the same answer to this fear of being locked out, being left with a dead key system. Instead, where the solution has started gravitating toward was, okay, let's make sure that we integrate external things that we depend on. A way, like we're taking them because they make us go faster. But that means that tomorrow, if this thing disappears, we have to make sure that we've integrated it in a way that makes it really easy to take it out and just go to the next thing that provides it. So there is indeed a lot of strong arming around, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that if I'm going to go and buy that service, it's going to be a very simple API interface that I use. It's going to solve a big problem for me, but I'm going to make sure that the interface is very well defined, that I know what I'm doing with you. And tomorrow, I can go to one of the other 50 companies out there that are doing exactly the same thing if you disappear. And it's obviously an ongoing pressure between competing forces, because on the other side, they obviously want you to be as locked in as possible. But I think the balance is very much in the direction of saneful reusability, because people are aware of this risk. It is very, very well perceived, as Jay pointed out. It is something that people consider a bigger risk today, so they're paying attention. And I think the industry is in a place where everything moves much faster than it used to because of this. Now, we can argue whether that is a good thing or not, because our lives are consumed by work a lot more than they used to be, because we are able to move constantly forward and come up with new things, and we sort of have to. But at the end of the day, the people buying, I hate how I say at the end of the day, the old time, people just end up buying the same, more and more things. They end up having more and more problems solved for them by others. So you could argue that this is a better place. I don't know.
If you could look at the source code for the VUC site, you would find commented out 5 or 6 WebRTC gadgets, widgets that were put up in order to join the call via SIP and via WebRTC. And, you know, they last for about 6 months, and then the API doesn't work anymore, or the company is resold, and we don't go that way anymore. I have a question, totally different question, well, slightly related. And this is for you, Emil, but it's also for anybody else who has an answer. How do you evaluate the contribution? Because we mentioned Google Plus, and that Google pulls the rug out of literally dozens of services every year. They start something, they end it, and too bad, it's free mostly. But how do you evaluate their contribution? Because after all, aren't they responsible for, is it VP9, or did that come from them, or all this work that they've done and that the users, by the way, have validated and used? Are they contributing, not only Google, but any of these companies, big ones? Are they adding to the richness, the patrimony, as you would?
Oh, wow. I would say, I'd love to answer, sorry, I would love to answer first on this, because I would actually need to take my son out of daycare in 7 minutes. This is an awesome question, and I think specifically in the area of real-time encoding and decoding, in the area of real-time communication, Google have been a model citizen, and there's a lot of noise around their contributions that I would like to comment on, because they have been fantastic. So first of all, VP8 was not it could be arguably called not really a Google contribution, a Google invention, sorry. but it was a Google contribution to the world. They made all the patents for VP8 free. They made all the code that uses that actually, the code of VP8 plus the code that uses VP8 in WebRTC, they made it free. That was the best. None of those things were conceived in Google, but Google gave them to the world, and Google continues giving the contributions to these things to the world. This is, I would say, the leading provider to of value to the word patrimony in the area of real-time communication. There has been a lot of noise around Google not following standards too much, and this is where religiousness is something to be careful about, because standards bodies are nothing else but bodies of humans with their own interests. There are many other companies there. There are many self-serving interests, and the fact that you disagree with the contributors to a standards body does not make you a bad contributor of value. They're quite the opposite. So if you look at even despite of the friction between Google and standards initiatives that were led by other companies like Google, and really the friction was between those, they have contributed all this work. They're contributing the world's best audio video stack. They keep maintaining it. And now these other initiatives like the Alliance for Open Media, for example, that's working on AV1, a lot of the work there is coming from Google, and the work ended up there because of the efforts that started by Google. And they ended up there for pragmatic reasons, because everyone hated how the H.264 ecosystem worked with patents. The amount of uncertainty around these patents, no one liked that. The companies that were being blamed for being mercenary and wanting to make money on everything, they actually didn't like that particularly either, because there was so much uncertainty around it, and they wanted to get out of that system and to not repeat the mistakes of H.264, which is why H.265 is going to be a failed effort, and the world is going to continue in the direction of AV1. But also, it's a much more of a base technology. This technology, it's no longer part of the, what was the word, Randy? What was the word? Le vernis. It's no longer part of that layer. That's now part of the base. So everyone wants to just make sure, okay, let's agree this is part of our electrical network. Everyone needs this piece. No one is going to succeed or die based on it. So this is now open. And we've moved now, and we're competing on upper layers and thinner layers. I think so. Yes, I'm very satisfied with Google's behavior as a citizen of the world in that regard.
Excellent.
Yeah, Emil, I'd like to clarify my comments about Google Plus, because I completely agree that Google has been an incredible overall contributor in so many different dimensions and so many different ways, and I think it's overall a fairly enlightened company. And it's just Google Plus is one of the most recent and one of the most pronounced services like that people have invested time and energy and content to, and all of a sudden it's gone. And there's no guarantee that an open source project's going to be around in a few years, because if the compensation, the monetization, the community falls apart or whatever, the same fate can happen where all of a sudden you've got dead code. So it's just a really interesting set of questions, and I don't have the answer for it, but I think it's at the heart of where we're headed with technology into the future. And I don't know exactly how we solve this, but these conflicts come up every day. And you and Jitsi, I commend you for starting this passionate project. And you were just following your passion and providing a service for people in your own, following your own interests, which is commendable. And your initiative and your community was bought by at least two entities, and I commend them for having the confidence to go in and buy something that's open source. So yeah.
Yep. Thank you for the kind words.
Are you coming back after you pick your son up, Emil, or not?
I probably won't be able to. I'd be happy to come back another time if you still want to hear my blabbering. I would certainly love to see you again, guys.
We
we want to see you, Emil, and very quickly.
you, yeah.
I'm very keen to find out what your slant on the new smartphone clients you've got out, the Jitsi Meet 19, because that's really new and exciting, and clearly you're using it in your hand right now.
I am. Yes, indeed.
Can you just go 30 seconds on Jitsi Meet 19 on iOS and Android?
Oh my! I'm really I'm really so unprepared. But so there's
got you.
there's been plenty of updates. You did get me. There's been plenty of updates over the past few months. Actually, Meet 19 specifically is just the last of many interesting updates. It is now possible to start live streaming from the mobile. It is possible to you get these indications about live streaming and recording in the client. You have chat on the iOS client, which is why I'm able to see all of your messages, which it wasn't possible to do on the mobile up until recently. You have much more of a stable application, much better adaptivity to network, the ability to switch into a phone mode, and really you have a state-of-the-art mobile client for joining meetings. So I really love how this application has been doing, and all of this is thanks to, none of this is me, by the way. All of this is the team. Saul, who has been here on this team, has worked on that a lot. He has been on the VUC. Saul Koretche, many of you know him. Zoli from our team, Pavel, Lenny, Christo, Damien. This is their work. So I'm lucky to work with a team of fantastic people, and I love each and every one of them. And thank you very much for having me.
We love you too, Emil. You're a star. You must come back sooner.
I would love to do that. Thank you very much, y'all. It was great to see you.
Good to have you, Emil. Here's the. Let me get this. Very hard to do this, but there it is, live on the Jitsi Meet client, Android.
Yeah, and that is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of complexity involved in putting that all together. Has Emil dropped off? Yes, he has.
Here we go. So, anybody else want to comment? The other topics that we had running? Oh,
yes, probably Emil had to go.
Yeah.
Just a quick observation before we close regarding the open source projects that have failed. Recently, there's been a smattering of Linux distros that have shut doors because contributions have dried up. I guess we are witnessing a new era for open source, where open source is getting used more and more demands are put on the teams that are mostly doing that as volunteers. And we might need open source to be picked up by larger teams with better structuring, better management, not necessarily something that has to be corporate or anything else. But,
well, I think it definitely doesn't have to be corporate. Take Kama-Elio as a good example, that you couldn't be further away from corporate than Kama-Elio, and it's one of the best open source, open projects going, isn't it?
And I'm happy to continue to sponsor Kama-Elio, as you can see there. But we need to be on our toes, because if we don't give the right resources to open source, it's going to dry up. So we need, probably we'll need to put some money in it with crowdfunding or something else, because I contributed to some projects completely free of charge, including projects that are now commercially driven. And I haven't seen a penny out of it, besides introducing functions that were functional and helpful for my own business.
Okay. Well, I think one of the traditional ways of supporting an open source project is that you engage the people who write the code to come and build you things built with that open source code, and they charge market rates, which they then take those proceeds and plow those back into the project. So they get to do what they want to do with their life, which is building things with open source. And commercial organizations get what they want, which is working code. And that's how the ecosystem works, I think.
We did.
I'm not a great fan of just randomly throwing money at people, but if you can engage the people who have the knowledge and the ability to write this stuff so that they have enough to exist and keep the projects going, then that's a brilliant way of doing it, I think.
We forgot.
I guess we should use more the bounty type of rewards. So people that something done in a project, put a contribution open there. Here's $1,000, £1,000 if someone can add this bit to that program.
That's a common thing, yeah. We forgot to ask Emil if he's sending anybody to ComCon, because last year, if I recall correctly, what's his name? Is it Igor? Is that the fellow who works with him? Is that the right name, James?
It's not Igor. It's one of his team managed to turn up, didn't they?
Somebody did show up, and I don't remember who.
Well, I'm hoping that we will see Emil and Jana this year at ComCon. We're still working on them, I think. This is where we wait for Dan to emerge and suddenly pop up and say, yes, they're coming, or something like that.
Yeah,
but,
maybe we should. Well, of course, 8 and 8.
But,
8 by 8 could afford. I was going to say they should maybe be in the giveaway, but the fact is 8 by 8 could probably send them if they want to.
Which kind of reminds me, have you guys submitted your applications for the community tickets?
Yes and no. Randy knows. I did, but it's a little secret. So let's see how it goes. This is the last day to put you in your
well, that's what I was going to mention. Today is the last day. So if there's anybody out there who feels that they really, 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 really want to go to ComCon but just can't afford it, then those community tickets are one way of doing it. Generously donated by Simwood and by Nimble Ape. Yeah, indeed. And the whole thing works well because last year, Randy, you got a ticket, and as did Andy Smith.
Was Andy there?
Yeah, I think he was, wasn't he?
Joking. All right. Any new business or old business? Go. It's time. It's on the hour here. So.
No, not particularly. I had an observation on APIs before, but it's probably a bit stale now. But if you want, I can drone on about that. Can I?
We just turn it off. No, go ahead if you must.
No, the point of using APIs and to be sure that the APIs will continue to work is if those APIs are used by the same business or other businesses to build products upon. So Google APIs will continue to work because Google needs them for their own products. Even if they close a product that is built on the APIs, some of those APIs in the package will always be used by something else. So it's very unlikely that the entire API will be destroyed or lost. So choose your APIs wisely.
But they do version them, and all the code you wrote for version 1 won't work on version 2. They send you a thing. An interesting quick note that is about Google but has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, which is that you may have gotten, maybe everybody with a Gmail account gets this, but I see that in the Play Store, they're saying that they are going to seriously examine all of the apps now. So why weren't they before? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. What they were doing before. I don't know.
Well, no, but it's not for like malicious software, but It's for respecting the conditions. And I'm going to guess that a lot of that has to do with categories. Because am I the only person who's ever noticed that in the Google App Store, there's a lot of things that say young people or teenagers, I think. And basically, I think, for example, Jitsi Meet might be under a funny label, because I think there's a reason why you don't put it under communications or something. There are a lot of things that are under like teenage and stuff that make no sense to me. But anyway, maybe they mean that they're okay for teenagers. James is studying his...
Yeah, I'm just going to look up and find out. I hadn't noticed that before.
Well, it's an email that just came through. Otherwise, old business, new business, no.
One bit of I have a request, Randy.
Hmm?
I would love to hear your
IFS.
What's that?
It better not be IFS.
No. The interplanetary file system? No. I would love to hear how your saxophone mastery is progressing at some point in the show. So,
There's a very easy way to do that, and that would be to go to soundcloud.com/Randulo and look at the tracks, because they're in chronological order. And there's a track.
Cool.
The last thing I recorded was probably the song of the month on a saxophone forum that I'm on. And that song happens to be Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. So everybody will recognize that. And it's a whole production I did
Nice.
I laid down every single track. I didn't play the drums. They're there, but I laid down all the tracks. So you can check out the saxophone.
Cool.
There's guitar, there's bass, and I think there might even be keyboard. SoundCloud.
I'll check it out. Very cool.
SoundCloud.com/Randulo. All right, that's it. We're going to keep the mature audiences only thing running in just a moment. Wait, how do I turn this on?
Okay, got a jet. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
How do I turn this off?
I don't know how to turn
So professional, isn't it?
I don't. Well, this is
How do I turn this out? Press a button.
everybody be quiet.
Just
Here we
Randy, plug and plug.